one of the most important themes that I've come to appreciate partly through the conversations I've had on this podcast is that although technology development is very important, it's and challenging. It's not the whole puzzle here we're trying to solve. So if we do have this end state of safe, sustainable, effective, accessible transportation, we need more than simply new technology to make that happen. You need to develop and implement intelligently that technology to make the change that you want to make. And depending on what technology you're talking about or who you're talking to, that implementation phase actually can be where the bulk of the challenges are, or at least there's a disproportionate amount of people, I think, working on the product development side now, and not as many people trying to solve this problem of, okay, how do we actually put this technology into use and make the changes that we're trying to make. And we see that with supply chain issues now, manufacturing issues that we have, as well as many downstream things of just realizing that, yeah, some of this technology that's been developed is not going into effect and ultimately not making the intended impact to the degree that it should be. So I kept coming back to this theme of implementation, and in particular within implementation, manufacturing, as I just alluded to, was this challenge that kept coming up. And even more specific within that, this challenge of low volume manufacturing seemed to be a tremendous hurdle. And there are a few different flavors of this. So one is you think of like a startup company or an emerging company that's developing a new technology. They do the product development work, do the R&D work, come up with something that solves the problem. They have a proof of concept, a prototype. They show, hey, look, this thing does what it's intended to do. That's awesome. That's great. And good thing is most intelligent groups of engineers and technicians come together. You can build one of these things. You can build a couple, a few even, and you can get that proof of concept phase into, and you can be successful there. But the next step then of building 10, building 100, building 1,000 of these products, or even more, looks very different. And the way you approach those builds needs to look very different. So rather than simply putting something together in a warehouse, in a garage, you need to be much more intentional about the manufacturing. Quality needs to be, you need these things to be consistent, right? You need to follow quality management process. You need to develop a highly effective and repeatable manufacturing process that allows you to build these products in a way that maintains the highest level of quality, or at least the level of quality that you need, and also gives you kind of that feedback of proof that yes, this every part was built the way that it was supposed to. But there's a balance here too. So despite the fact that 1,000 or 100 is very different than one or two, it's also very different than what we'll call high volume. And high volume is relative depending on the industry. For automotive, it's hundreds of thousands. For, I don't know, if we're talking about like Class 8 trucks, we're tens of thousands maybe. We're talking agriculture, construction, less than that, marine. I mean, there's this definition of what is high volume is really relative depending on the industry and the product. But there's this consistent theme then that there is an established supply chain for high volume. There's tier one, tier two suppliers. There are contract manufacturers who are very good at high volume manufacturing. Once you get to that level, that's great. You can tap into that supply chain. You can utilize that. But that doesn't help you when you're in the low volume phase. All right. So if you're not building 100,000 of something, if you need to build 1,000, you try to work with these companies that are optimized. They probably don't even want to work with you, right? Because they are making margin based on particular quantities of products. And if you're making much less than they're used to, it's probably not even worth their time. And if they do work with you, you're trying to utilize these processes that are optimized for much higher volumes, and you're trying to scale it down drastically, and you end up with something that's likely automated more than it should be, likely requires much more capital expenditure upfront than a young company should. So that's not that big of a problem if your startup and you have this hockey stick growth curve that we see so often, that projections of market adoption. We have, oh yeah, we're going to start here, and we're going to find that we're going to take off, right? And we're going to reach that high volume mark in a couple of few years. If that happens, that's great. But the reality is, most new companies coming into the space do not follow that growth curve. That their hopes, their targets at the beginning, it takes them much longer to reach the scale, and some companies never reach that scale at all. They find this kind of middle ground, and that can be a very viable business. And it's not necessarily a problem intrinsically, but it is a problem if your approach has been completely dependent on meeting these volume targets, and you've sunk yourself into such a hole with capital expenditure up front that you're never going to pay it off, because your piece price and your per unit profit is not going to get you there unless you're selling high volumes. So this aspect of low volume, very challenging. There's also another flavor of low volume manufacturing that I would challenges that I would mention, and this is the one I don't know, probably the least exciting from the outside I'm looking in, but this is companies who are pivoting away from legacy products. So think of, for example, a company who in the propulsion system space, they've been doing conventional propulsion system for I don't know, for forever, for their company's history. Now they want to transition. They want to transition towards electrification, and they're putting a lot of resource in the product development and transforming assembly plants and all of this. But you also have to realize, yes, there's this exciting new thing coming. There's also the reality of legacy products aren't going away. Internal combustion engines are going to continue to be sold for some period of time. No one knows exactly what that is, but for some period of time. And those volumes going to drop over time. So what used to be or currently is high volume isn't going to be anymore. And these companies need to find a way to handle this effectively so that they can focus their efforts on reforming themselves, making the positive impact that they want to make in these new exciting technology areas. I'll also throw out a third example. So, third flavor of low volume manufacturing challenges. There's a truth that not all products, and I mentioned this before, but not all products need to reach the high volume threshold to be considered successful. Some products, some companies can have a long, profitable run of success by serving a specific niche at lower than industry standard volumes. Again, not on its surface a problem, but it is a problem if you try to shoehorn a high volume manufacturing approach into these lower volumes. So regardless which flavor we're talking about, these three different options I mentioned, I firmly believe that this challenge of low volume manufacturing is a significant hurdle for many of the companies working to define safe, sustainable, effective, and accessible transportation ecosystems. So with all this on the backdrop, this is why I'm so excited about what we're doing here at Edison. We're here as an enabler. You have all these companies that are facing this challenge of low volume manufacturing, and we're here to be a solution for them to overcome that. So this is the one problem that we are working to handle and to address and to do really well. We've established an experienced team, done this work for some of the most complex technologies in the industry, including some of the biggest names in the industry, and we're laser focused on this particular challenge of being really good at handling low volume manufacturing, being really good at handling high change environments. So when you have products that need to change over time, you have volumes that need to change rapidly sometimes or aren't consistent, and you have supply chains that are not optimized around the specific volumes that we're talking about. And so we put our systems in place, our processes in place, our entire focus as an organization as doing this really well. And in that, I believe playing a role to help companies that would otherwise kind of fall into this valley of despair with their upfront huge capital expenditures and this inefficient approach to low volume manufacturing. We're helping to smooth that over for them and to be someone that they can rely on as a trusted, high quality partner to take care of their low volume manufacturing needs.